From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern.
Joe Manchin drops a bombshell, a surprise announcement as the Democratic senator from West Virginia says he will not seek re-election in 2024. The U.S. says Israel has agreed to 4-hour-long pauses in fighting so that people can flee northern Gaza. We'll speak with former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta on the challenges all sides are facing in this war. Hillary Clinton speaking to Bloomberg on the subject.
I think there needs to be new leadership of the Israelis and the Palestinians in order to have any chance at some kind of peace deal, especially a two-state solution.
As the Hollywood actors' strike appears to be ending, a summer of labor strife seems to be nearing a close as well. The latest, Las Vegas culinary workers nearing a deal with the casinos to fend off a strike this weekend. We'll speak ahead with SEIU President Mary Kay Henry. All that. Plus, we have the results of a brand new Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll of 7 swing states. And that's where we begin. Anne-Marie has the details for us. Anne-Marie?
That's right, Joe. It's an exclusive set of results that we have. Bloomberg News teaming up with Morning Consult. And this one was conducted after the attacks by Hamas in Israel. And it shows that among voters in 7 swing states, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, people are far more in favor of aid to the U.S.-Mexico border, almost 4-1, more so than the big foreign policy challenges the Biden administration faces, namely when it comes to Israel and Ukraine. And while a plurality of swing state voters say Biden is doing the right amount of help when it comes to Israel, among younger voters who are key to Biden's re-election hopes next year, 43% are in support for aid to Israel, while 50% support aid for Palestinians in Gaza. And younger voters also are more likely to say that Biden is doing too much for Israel and not enough for the people of Gaza. Though, Joe, we know foreign policy rarely wins presidential elections. When it comes to the number one priority for voters, it's the economy. It continues to rank amongst the most important issue, followed by things like immigration, democracy, abortion. But near last in the poll, garnering only 3% of respondents, was Israel. And trust is also, when it comes to the president, to handle the big issues, is another problem for Biden. Voters in these swing states say they trust Trump more than Biden to handle immigration, Israel, and what is going on in Ukraine. As far as the overall picture goes, swing state voters trended slightly down for Biden, with Donald Trump polling higher than the president in 6 of the 7 states, with Michigan being a dead heat. But this morning, President Biden, Joe, shrugged off the slew of downbeat polls.
Why do you think it is that you're trailing Trump in all these swing state polls?
Because you don't read the polls, Ross. There are 10 polls. 8 of them, I'm beating them in those states. 8 of them. You guys only do 2. CNN and New York Times. Check it out. Check it out. We'll get you a copy of all those polls.
You don't believe you're trailing in battleground states?
No, I don't.
Let's broaden the conversation now. Bring in Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson and Michael Shepard to join us here at the table with these results. It's great to have both of you with us. Michael, what's the takeaway here? Because we keep hearing that Joe Biden would rather run against Donald Trump than anyone because he thinks that's the one man that he can beat out of this field. But you start looking at these swing states and wonder if that should be the conventional wisdom.
Well, the underlying theme in these polls is that voters want neither Biden nor Trump. And that is something that comes through in the responses, not only in this month's survey, but in the preceding one that we did. And it is a frustration that is born of where people see the economy. And they're also concerned about Biden's age as well. That is something else that is being mentioned by voters as a concern. And they would rather see 2 other people heading the top of each party's ticket come next year.
Yeah, when you talk about the fact that people don't want to see neither of these individuals, you have to think of someone else that we asked about in this poll, and that was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He has the backing of 10% of swing state voters in his independent presidential bid. So he looks like he's garnering support not just from the left, but also the right. He seems to be pulling from everyone, Wendy. Is that correct?
That's right. Unlike a typical third-party candidate who is similar enough to one of the parties that, for example, Ross Perot in 1992 pulled from George H.W. Bush and gave the election to Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. In this case, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is pulling from both Trump and Biden. So if that holds over the next year, then he just diminishes the vote total for both of them. And again, voters are presented with candidates no one wants. If that tends to change, if as he campaigns more and has more money because of this and campaigns more and people get to know him, then we'll see who he pulls from, whether it's Donald Trump voters, and that helps Biden, or he pulls from disaffected Biden voters who might be seduced by the name Kennedy and, and helps Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Well, we take away, though, that the economy is the #1 issue for voters. So let's look into your crystal ball here for a minute, Michael. I won't ask you anything to put you on the spot, but if you're Joe Biden, if you're the Biden campaign, you're looking at the second half of next year. Voters are going to be keying in on the economy to make their decision on who the next president should be. You've introduced them to Bidenomics. You let the Fed unleash on inflation, and you're hoping that they land the plane, a soft landing, if you will, in the second half of next year and arrive at 2%. If that happens, these voters, they say the economy is the most important thing to them. Vote Joe Biden, no?
Well, we talked to the head of Biden's reelection campaign, and Julia Rodriguez insisted that we're underestimating the president and that he has the ability to turn it around in the polls. The trouble is right now for the president that voters so far are not embracing Bidenomics, right. The umbrella of programs that he passed within 2 years of taking office. That's infrastructure, it's funding for chips, and it's also his funding for the green economy and electric vehicles. Now, when voters hear of those individual pieces, they like them a little bit more than when put under this umbrella of Bidenomics. Whether or not the president is able to continue to successfully sell it will play a big role. And also, even more so than Bidenomics itself, it's what is the price of milk? Is it still going to be as high as voters see it in the grocery stores? Mm-hmm. They keep hearing that inflation is slowing, but milk is still pretty high from what they remember a year or two ago.
Right. Consumer prices are just still too high for families, and some of them are living paycheck to paycheck. We also have more news about 2024, and this is a certain senator who I think liked to act like he was president in the early part of the Biden administration himself, is decided he is not going to seek re-election.
I've made one of the toughest decisions of my life and decided that I will not be running for re-election to the United States Senate. But what I will be doing is traveling the country and speaking out to see if there is an interest in creating a movement to mobilize the middle.
Joe, he said that he's going to be traveling the country. Mm-hmm. Does he throw his name in this ring for president?
It's a great question. No Labels would love to know, I think, right? What are you going to do other than maybe go away and make some money? I'm not sure what else his option would be at this point. We learned about this on the air when Wendy Benjaminson was with me earlier on Bloomberg Radio, and it was hard to tell. I mean, this came out of the blue. What do you make of the timing?
It is very odd timing. Even more odd was No Labels' statement about it, which was, that's nice. We're looking around for a presidential candidate.
Yes, they are.
It was really sort of difficult to tell whether they're just being coy or whether Joe Manchin, maybe overstepped or something or gave away some secret they had. But he was at an event there in July.
That's right.
And if you are just retiring, I mean, he's 76, or you are going to run for some other office in West Virginia, why would you travel the country? I mean, there's just that traveling the country thing, as Anne Marie pointed out, is the big hint that he is obviously trying for something else, whether it's this year or 4 years from now.
We also, of course, Joe, can't have our panel with us and not talk about what happened almost 24 hours ago, and that's the debate.
I was going to say, you might need to remind us. There was a debate.
It's been a long day.
It's true, but I say this because tensions were flaring last night between Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy. Take a listen.
Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
They're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Your adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it, and that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer.
Okay, so tensions were hot between those two. As expected, this was really gearing up. She does not like where Vivek Ramaswamy stands, especially on the foreign policy spectrum.
You're right. This had been building in the previous two debates, and it was bound to bubble over. Overall, we did see more control by the moderators over the five candidates on stage. It helped that there were fewer there, not so many shouting over each other, but they did manage to engage in a much more thoughtful conversation on the issues, save for moments like those.
You wake up and start wondering about a winner the morning after, and a lot of folks are still saying Donald Trump, who was not even on the stage.
Yeah, it feels like we are living in parallel universes of primaries. We just started our show talking about how Trump is beating the current president in swing states, yet he wasn't at that debate.
Undercard debate. And that was quite a rally he held. He continues with counter-programming and says he will not attend the next one either. Our thanks to Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson and Michael Shepard for getting us started here today on Balance of Power. Coming up, we turn to the war between Israel and Hamas.
Finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas.
Finish them. Finish them.
Smoke those terrorists.
You have the responsibility and the right to wipe Hamas off of the map. You must go in and make sure that Hamas can never do this again.
Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself.
The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas.
I think you are in favor of a humanitarian pause or pauses, but you're against the ceasefire, which many people in this region are asking for. You know, the numbers of dead are rising rapidly, 10,000 according to Hamas, admittedly, but you still got like 89 dead at the UN, which is a gigantic number for the United Nations, the Red Crescent and so on. Can you perhaps explain why you don't want a ceasefire?
A ceasefire, if it were possible, which frankly I don't think is possible. I don't think, Israel is interested in a ceasefire at this point, but they are perhaps willing to have what we do call humanitarian pauses for the purpose of both getting aid in to try to assist the civilians in Gaza, but also getting the more than 240 hostages out. These hostages are not just Israeli. One of the biggest groups of hostages are workers from Thailand who are working on farms in Israel. So there is a global dimension to the hostages that a pause could perhaps inspire some willingness on the part of Hamas to let the hostages go. But a ceasefire that would freeze the situation at this point is not something that is going to, really undermine Hamas's capacity, especially with 200 miles of tunnels that they have constructed over the last decade, to launch yet another attack on Israel, and that would be intolerable.
Hillary Clinton, of course, the former Secretary of State, Democratic nominee for president in 2016, in conversation with Bloomberg editor-in-chief John Micklethwaite at the New Economy Forum in Singapore. For more on the state of the war between Israel and Hamas, we bring in former U.S. Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta. Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you. I wonder your thoughts right off the bat here on this idea of these daily 4-hour-long pauses and whether this will help to save civilians who have otherwise been trapped in Gaza.
I think it's a positive step to provide for these humanitarian pauses. Whether or not they'll do it every day, who knows? Depends on what happens on the battlefield. But I think to at least provide for the ability to get humanitarian aid in, to be able to help those that have been injured and hurt in the battlefield, particularly the innocent Palestinians that have been hurt. I think it's a good thing. I think I don't think it takes away from Israeli strategy. They're going to continue to move against Hamas. They're going to continue to push to try to do what they can to destroy Hamas. But it does give you the opportunity to be able to, at the same time, provide some humanitarian help to those in need. So I think this is a good step forward.
The president actually just putting out a tweet, and what he's hoping for is at least 150 aid trucks for that humanitarian aid to get to the Palestinian people. We know that he's been working the phones, not just to Benjamin Netanyahu, but leaders in the Gulf. And we also saw Secretary Blinken make another trip. He just wrapped that up around the world to focus on this issue. Would you say that the Biden administration has a win now here? Did they put enough pressure on Netanyahu to allow for these humanitarian pauses?
Well, there's no question that Secretary Blinken, his trip to the Middle East, not only visiting with the Israeli leaders, but visiting with our Arab allies as well and visiting with others, I think he was probably stressing the same message to many of them, which is the importance of providing a humanitarian pause and continuing to talk with them. I'm sure President Biden in his talks with Netanyahu continued to emphasize the importance of that. Look, I think it is very important. I don't think you have to choose between military strategy and whether or not you provide humanitarian aid. I think you can do both, particularly when you've got the battlefield advantage right now, as the Israelis do, to be able to control half of Gaza and now are focusing on the southern part of Gaza as well. So I think they're in good military position to be able to hold that and at the same time provide a few hours, 4 hours, in order to get humanitarian aid into the area. So I do think the United States deserves some credit for having pushed that position.
This is all, of course, happening as Israel says its troops have entered the heart of Gaza City. Secretary, it's been a couple of weeks since we've had a chance to talk to you, and I just wonder where your head is on this whole operation, knowing the Biden administration was urging restraint and an opportunity to slow things down so civilian lives could be saved, so aid could be delivered. We've talked about that part of it. How about the offensive operation right now in Gaza? Is this the peak of the so-called invasion?
Well, you have to look at the objectives here. And clearly, the first objective is to destroy Hamas. That is what produced this war in the first place, was an attack, a brutal attack by Hamas that killed 1,400 Israelis. And Israel is defending their country and making clear that they are going to destroy Hamas and make sure that it never again has the opportunity to conduct another October 7th attack. And I think they're making progress on that. I think their move into Gaza has gone after tunnels, gone after Hamas leaders. And I think the next step is obviously targeting the south. I would recommend that they try to develop some better targeting to be able to determine where Hamas is located and be able to target those locations. I think good intelligence is absolutely essential at this point. It's going to take a few more months to be able to accomplish that goal. But clearly, right now, they have developed a good hold on Gaza. I think they are well positioned now to be able to ultimately move against whatever Hamas remains in the south. And in the end, that's what this war is about, the ability to destroy Hamas and make sure that they cannot attack Israel again.
Well, Mr. Secretary, can we talk about what happens after Hamas is destroyed? The individuals I speak to, whether it's in the United States or in the Gulf, say that it's not just about a change in leadership in Gaza. Many want to see a stronger Palestinian Authority, maybe a successor to Mahmoud Abbas. But what about Netanyahu himself? Many say that he has to go in order for the next phase following this war. Do you agree?
Well, I think if it's going to be successful, it really is going to have to involve Arab countries working together along with the Palestinian leadership to be able to establish a credible Palestinian leadership. Unfortunately, Netanyahu never showed any interest in the two-state solution, did not support trying to bolster the Palestinians in that effort. And frankly, Netanyahu doesn't have credibility with regards to the ability to get the Palestinians to be able to govern themselves. And in addition to that, frankly, Abbas doesn't have much credibility as well, the head of the Palestinians in the West End. I think that if we're going to be able to achieve something after this war, it is really going to require the ability of the United States and our allies, our Arab allies, to be able to work together to try to strengthen the Palestinians, try to provide the leadership necessary, but also to provide security in that area to make sure that Hamas never again comes back. It's going to require all of those elements if we're going to be able to have a viable plan after.
Leon Panetta, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your insights. Turning now, we're going to go back to the U.S. economy. Fed Chair Jerome Powell speaking earlier today at the IMF's annual research conference. He said the central bank is being cautious and won't hesitate to hike if needed.
U.S. inflation has come down over the past year, but remains well above our 2% target. My colleagues and I are, of course, gratified by this progress, but we expect that the process of getting inflation sustainably down to 2% has a long way to go.
Bloomberg Kayleigh Lyons was tracking all of his comments and joins us now for more. Kayleigh.
Well, in some ways, this conversation around inflation, Anne-Marie, feeds into the conversation you were just having with Leon Panetta. What's going on in the Middle East and the potential ramifications for energy prices is something that the Fed has to watch here in terms of geopolitics, because they're still watching inflation, and we know things can be very choppy and a lot can influence it. Right now, inflation, yes, has progressed from, say, close to 7% a year ago on core CPI down to around the 4% level. But that journey from 4% to 2% may actually be the hardest part. And that is why, as you alluded to, Anne-Marie, Chairman Powell essentially told the market today, look, it is not over until it's over. If we need to, we will hike again. The exact quote is, if it becomes appropriate to tighten policy further, we will not hesitate to do so. Now, part of this may be the chairman of the Fed pushing back on what we have seen in the market over the course of the last week plus. Since the Fed decided not to hike rates last week, the market essentially said, you know what, we don't think they're hiking again. They're done. And what we saw as a result was actually an easing of financial conditions. That is the exact opposite of what the Federal Reserve is trying to achieve. They want things to tighten further. They did see a little bit of tightening, though, in response to Chairman Powell's comments today. We saw bond yields moving higher. Now, part of that was a no good, very bad 30-year bond auction, but we were up 13 basis points on the 10-year on this Thursday, and stocks were down pretty much across the board. And now, also as a result, the market is expecting that the Fed is going to start cutting rates later next year. Instead of June, they think the first 25 basis point cut, according to swaps, will be in July. That puts us in the second half of 2024. And of course, the later we get into next year, the closer we get to a presidential election. So monetary policy is going to have some pretty big political implications potentially. Of course, the Fed already has been a subject of political debate for some time now, and that was definitely the case as well on the debate stage last night when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis took a pretty direct swipe at monetary policymakers. Take a listen.
I'm also going to rein in the Federal Reserve. They have helped create, with their reckless monetary policy, what we have faced since the COVID-19 pandemic. Fed should focus on stable prices. They are not an economic central planner for the American people.
And of course, he's not actually the only Republican we've heard similar things from. A lot of them have pushed back against Chairman Powell. While at the same time, on the other side of the aisle, you have a lot of Democrats saying the Fed already has gone too far and they need to be paying more attention to the employment side of the mandate, less so to the inflation one.
I'm compelled by some of the things that he had to say today, Jay Powell, that is, including a few head fakes.
Yeah.
When you consider what's happening in Israel and in Ukraine, it's essentially impossible. Forget a data-dependent Fed. It's a news-dependent Fed.
Absolutely. And uncertainty makes it incredibly hard to do the Fed's job right now. They can't really predict what's coming down the line. They can only read what the data is telling them in that moment. This is actually something that was discussed on the debate stage as well last night when the moderators asked the candidates what they would do to try to address inflation immediately if they were to sit in the Oval Office. A lot of them said unleash American energy. That ultimately, a lot of it comes to energy prices, what people are paying at the gas pump, and that filters down to the price pressures all throughout the economy as well. So energy in the Middle East or in Europe or wherever else is definitely a focal point.
Do you think Americans know we are the biggest producer of fossil fuels?
I'm quite sure they don't.
I don't think so.
We didn't hear it on the debate stage last night.
Become reality.
And the Biden administration doesn't really tout that.
Well, that's true. Maybe you'll hear more about that on the campaign trail. I suspect you will. Kayleigh Lyons, thank you. This is Bloomberg. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV. From hot labor summer to a cool deals fall. Consider the number of labor issues the country was facing this summer. United Auto Workers striking against the big three U.S. automakers after a 6-week strike. They reached a resolution with pay increases upwards of 80% for veteran auto workers.
A dual strike on Hollywood, with the writers settling last month and the actors coming together for a tentative deal just last night.
And the latest, Las Vegas' powerful culinary workers union representing the city's hotel and casino workers, thousands of them, reaching a deal now, tentatively, with MGM and Caesars. Ahead of a Friday strike deadline, the organization still needs to come to a deal with Wynn Resorts, and our ears are open on that. Let's go now to Mary Kay Henry, president of the Services Employees International Union, also known, of course, as the SEIU. It's great to see you, and welcome back to Bloomberg. There's one labor deal that I did not mention, and that was at UPS and the threat of a Teamsters strike. Mary Kay, I wonder if you see any of these other actions happening if it weren't the precedent set by the Teamsters and UPS earlier this year.
Yeah, I think the UPS drivers made it crystal clear that joining together in record numbers and making a demand on wages and safety protections for the amount of weight they had to lift and the heat conditions of this past summer helped raise the bar and inspire workers in the way you just reviewed, from Hollywood to the big three to the casinos in Vegas to the Kaiser Permanente workers that we represent, that also achieved a historic agreement with that company, and to fast food workers who now are going to have a seat at the table in California, 500,000 going to $20 an hour in April, and being able to raise wage and benefit standards. I think we're seeing an unprecedented solidarity season, from workers who have collective bargaining to workers who are organizing like at Starbucks and want to reach a first contract with these companies.
Well, you had a big win today when it comes to Kaiser workers. A new labor deal, sizable increases. This deal approved by 98.5% of union members who voted for this. And this is guaranteeing a 21% wage increase. So given the fact that you were closely following this and a part of this, do you expect more in not just the healthcare space, but really just across the board?
Yes, I think that workers are fired up and fed up. Essential workers especially led us through a pandemic, and they're using their collective power in their unions and in organizing and striking and demanding to become a part of a union to raise wages and protect themselves. The Kaiser workers were also concerned about their patients and chronic understaffing that they think this wage increase will help address, along with the employer commitment to do training and upgrading of incumbent workers in the system to help fill all the open positions.
So who's next? Now that you have this momentum, Sean Fain has been talking a big game about Tesla, or is it Starbucks, Mary Kay? Who's next?
We don't have to choose, Joe. All those workers are demonstrating and organizing. We want Starbucks workers to achieve a seat at the table with that corporation. We want airport service workers, who I was demonstrating with today at DCA from all over the country, to get written into the FAA reauthorization, so workers who work for the most profitable airlines in the country can have a living wage and paid time off. Wheelchair attendants, baggage handlers, cabin cleaners, they've been written off for far too long, and we want Congress to hold the airlines accountable by writing them into the FAA reauthorization.
President Biden was asked today about the UAW going after and trying to unionize. Joe mentioned Tesla, but also Toyota, and the president said, quote, absolutely. Do you think President Biden has any way here in terms of why we had such a hot labor summer? And as Joe talked about, you know, the cool deals of the fall. Did the president really put his thumb on the nail, trying to say, because he's the most pro-labor union, really had to do with the fact that wages are not keeping up with inflation?
Well, I think when the president of the United States goes to a picket line, it sends a message to every worker everywhere that the man with the most power in our nation and around the world is willing to stand with workers who want a fair shake with the employer that they sacrificed for during the bankruptcy, and we're trying to recover from the sacrifices they made. And he's also sending a message to Starbucks workers who are fighting to get a seat at the table and want to be able to collectively bargain like the UAW members just did. And so it is a source of inspiration to workers when the President of the United States understands that working people are still trying to make ends meet in this economy. 60% of American workers are living paycheck to paycheck. 40% can't afford a $400 emergency. And so it's important for workers to be able to use their collective power to be able to raise wages and create decent jobs in every sector of the economy.
So where do we go from here then as we head into fall, Mary Kay? The President of the United States is looking for endorsements. Does he deserve one from the UAW? Because we look back at voting data from the last election, and you see a lot of rank and file members voting for Donald Trump.
Well, I think the UAW members are the ones that will decide that. I know that the members of SEIU by 80% voted for President Biden in 2020, and our service and care workers understand this is a president who sees them, who understands that the dignity of work is about more than just a paycheck. It's about having a voice on the job through the union. And so I expect that our members are going to be fired up to turn out and vote in record numbers in November of 24.
President of the SEIU, Service Employees International Union, President Mary Kay Henry, thank you so much for your time. Coming up the program, we'll dive into the third GOP debate last night in Miami with our political panel next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg.
The Democrats have taken a position they will not identify the point at which there should be any protection all the way up until birth. That is wrong, and we cannot stand for that.
I trust the people of this country, state by state, to make the call for themselves. I'm 100% pro-life. We need a 15-week federal limit.
As much as I'm pro-life, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice. No Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president can ban these state laws. So let's find consensus.
Last night's Republican presidential candidates were in Miami at the third GOP debate and sparred over key topics, namely their abortion. For more, let's bring in our political panel, Alvin Jordan, Vice President at Rock Solutions, and Sarah Chamberlain, Republican Main Street Partnership President and CEO. Thank you both for joining us. It's been really a busy 24 hours. But that debate comes on the heels of Republicans losing in Virginia, in Ohio, in Kentucky, and one of the key aspects of that was abortion. Did anyone get the messaging correct last night?
No. In my opinion, no. Abortion, we keep missing the point that we have to talk about this as women's health care. I mean, you and I, women, this is our health care. This is not just abortion. And I'm hoping to educate the Republican Main Street Partnership members on this, and hopefully they will start to message us.
You're very far from the Republican stance. I mean, there was a governor on that stage that signed a 6-week abortion ban.
I know.
He didn't talk about it, though, did he?
He did not talk about it.
Which I found interesting. Nikki Haley, though, I will not judge anyone for being pro-choice. She did seem to have a more nuanced approach than anyone else on the stage. Does that become the Republican message on this issue?
I certainly hope so. If you notice, she was the only woman on the stage, and she's had
so someone
children.
did hit the mark for you.
She did hit it pretty closely, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Alvin, when you start to hear someone like, to Joe's point, Nikki Haley, having this nuance, talking about abortion, saying, I'm not going to demonize anyone that's pro-choice. I am just pro-life. She talked about her own personal struggle, also having children. She must be the one that you're all looking at thinking, if she was able to go past Donald Trump, it's going to be very challenging for our incumbent.
I've kind of been saying that the whole time, and I think last night was kind of evident of that fact. This morning, having a conversation with my wife, and she was like, I liked what Nikki Haley said last night, and I was like, but did it move you? And she was like, no, I think it did. To your point, like, as the only woman on the stage, I think it's an opening. And unfortunately, we've said it continuously, a battle for second, and I think it would be a bit more scary, if you want to use that word, for Democrats if she was leading, because every time she's on screen, I feel like she gets better, she's stronger, she checks all the boxes. But again, the points in the polling kind of don't lie. But I think she's saying some of the things that maybe some others need to kind of take note of, for sure.
She is leading Joe Biden. This Marquette University poll in Wisconsin shows a 9-point lead, if you believe that, at this stage. But we did finally hear about the guy who wasn't there, the man that Joe Biden would reportedly like to face, despite some challenging polling numbers there today, even from Bloomberg and Morning Consult. The candidates did take some shots at the former president. Let's watch.
Everybody wants to talk about President Trump.
I'll say this about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016.
He was the right president at the right time. I don't think he's the right president now.
He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He should explain why he didn't have Mexico pay for the border wall.
He used to be right on Ukraine and foreign issues. Now he's getting weak in the knees and trying to be friendly again.
Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country.
He said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing.
So is this another situation, Sarah? I'm guessing you're going to say too little, too late. I won't put words in your mouth, but did Donald Trump win last night by not showing?
He always wins by not showing. Because they can't attack him directly, and he doesn't have to respond to the attacks. He had another event, and he's doing his typical speech, and everybody's applauding. He had thousands of people who turned out. Yeah. And, they continue to kind of fight each other and fight a ghost that's never going to show up to be there with them. I don't think he's going to debate it all.
Was Roseanne Barr. I had to bleep, so you couldn't even understand what she was.
I did hear Joe today trying to put this SOT together, and every other word he was bleeping. And at this point, it's like, I don't even know if you can air it. I don't know if it's airable.
No, I'm not sure it was.
Did you air it?
Well, with a lot of bleeps. I don't think one word. A lot of cheering and chanting and bleeps. A lot of deep state talk. A lot of cussing. And then the same stump speech you would expect from Donald Trump, and not a surprise, he says he will not attend the next debate either.
Nope, and that one's going to be in Alabama. But Alvin, isn't this exactly where the Democrats want the Republicans?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the only individual that Biden at this point can beat, former President Trump. Because to Joe's point, when you put him up against DeSantis or Haley, they have a much better chance of beating Biden.
I mean, one would think, right? And I honestly, after last night's debate, Nikki Haley looked strong to me. I just have to reiterate it, and I think as long as the competent,
I feel like
is your wife watching?
Yeah, that's funny. I'm sure she is. Hello. The point I'm trying to reiterate though is competent politicians that look like that they could unite the country and work across the aisle and literally move the needle in a positive direction are a threat to the current administration for sure. And so I would, if I'm the Biden administration, root for and support all of the Trump being absent and rallies that kind of go alongside these debates along the way, because it for sure is a positive in that way.
They welcome the indictments as well. As it
for
turns
sure.
out. Coming up, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin announcing he will not seek re-election. One of the big breakers today. We'll be back with our political panel for their take on it. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV.
Every incentive in Washington is designed to make our politics extreme. The growing divide between Democrats and Republicans is paralyzing Congress and worsening our nation's problems. The majority of Americans are just plain worn out.
West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, there, breaking news today. Yeah, he's not running for re-election. For more, we reassemble our political panel. Alvin Jordan, Vice President at Rock Solutions, is with us, along with Sarah Chamberlain, Republican Main Street Partnership President and CEO. This one really caught people by surprise today, Sarah.
No,
I wonder
not
your
really.
thoughts on the timing. You thought you'd hear from Joe Manchin today?
He said he was going
maybe
to go
not
to Thanksgiving
today,
dinner.
but we're not surprised that he decided not to run because Governor Justice
is going to win this, right? So he didn't have a clear path to victory.
Correct.
But what does he do? Is the question. No labels is sniffing around.
They are
for a candidate.
They are, and that would be a problem for Joe Biden if they get in.
Supposedly,
there's no question.
But is that the match you're looking at? They're talking to Larry Hogan. A lot of people.
Larry Hogan could be VP. I don't know. It'd be an interesting ticket. I actually don't think when push comes to shove, he'll actually run.
You do not.
I do not. But he'd certainly be a serious candidate if he did. And I think he would pull from Joe Biden. And I think the Democrats would have a real problem with that.
Well, the Democrats already in our poll are having a problem even with RFK. He's pulling from both Trump and he's pulling from Biden. But this was the part that a lot of people focused on. What I'll be doing is traveling the country and speaking out to see if there's an interest in creating a quote, movement to mobilize the middle. What does the White House or the campaign do with this kind of rhetoric from one of their own?
Probably the same thing that they were doing this time last year when they were trying to get the bills passed, like closed door meeting. What do you want? I mean, just to take a step back, this was gut wrenching and pretty brutal in my phone. I received both notes of oh my God and shock and awe, and then also many notes from my home state of Texas saying, okay, looks like we've got to, defeat Ted Cruz in order to get that seat back. And so I think, if the Biden administration knew exactly what Joe Manchin was going to do, I think that they would, play things in a whole different ball game. But they don't. They don't clearly. And I think it will only be to the detriment of the party if they can't figure out what that plan and plan of attack might be to see if they can't, pull it in closer so that it doesn't, to your point earlier, pull away votes.
Well, this news lands with great uncertainty over the balance of power on Capitol Hill as we try to figure out how to fund the government, never mind what the agenda might be next year with a new speaker. Several senators weighed in on the likelihood of a government shutdown today, talking with Bloomberg. Let's listen.
The Republicans in the House of Representatives and the Speaker of the House are just out there playing political theater. And if they keep this up, they're going to shut down the federal government.
Really, this should start in the House. So let's see what I'm willing to let them go first and see what they come up with. And if it's a good faith approach, I'd say let's do that. And let's finish our appropriations bills.
If the House sends us an irresponsible CR, then the risk of a government shutdown is pretty great. So it's really in the hands of Speaker Johnson and the House.
Negotiations are ongoing right now, as I understand it. Very few members of Congress, House or Senate, want to shut the government down. So minds tend to be focused in the 11th hour.
I'm going to remind everyone that it was Sarah Chamberlain was the one voice who accurately predicted what happened last time we were walking up on the cliff. She said, we're not going to shut down. Everyone said, yeah, we are.
And it came within hours.
You didn't hear? Yeah. Well, so she's back at the table. It's a week and a day away, Sarah. What's going to happen?
Okay, this was tough. I think in the very last moment we don't shut down, but I'm gonna sweat it more. Last time I was 100% confident from the beginning.
What was different?
This time I'm not. To be honest with you, I knew Kevin much better than I know the current speaker. So I had a lot of faith that Kevin would cut the deals. I don't know the current speaker at all, to be honest. But the Republican Main Street Partnership members are really pushing him because we're the ones that live in the bubble. We're the ones that will lose. We will lose the majority if the members lose, and they do not want government shutdown because all the polling shows it will be blamed on the Republicans. So I think when it's over, we will not shut down, but I'm really nervous. I think it's going to come right to the wire.
But he's struggling to get bills on the floor. How does he get a CR on the floor?
A lot of negotiating behind the scenes, a lot of working with the Main Street members. The staff was actually meeting with them on Monday, so they're trying. It's just, he's new. This is really a tough job, and he's never been in leadership before, and then here he is having all this put on his plate and has to get it resolved, within 2 weeks. But he will. He's getting there. They're having a lot of meetings. So we will get this done. We'll get this settled.
What's your feel at this point, knowing that we're talking about a laddered CR that most lawmakers can't really even define? What are we talking about a week from today?
The biggest issue to me in even thinking about that is that I don't trust the current House to be able to handle much. And so I think when you start talking, I get nervous when you start talking about laddered CRs, because I think you need to figure out a way to perhaps even pause and get as much done as possible. And so I'm kind of in the ballpark of I don't believe that we'll shut down. I believe it's too much riding on it for it to actually in the shutdown. But I do think we have to really look at like prioritizing and getting as much done as possible, because I think, kind of if left to their own vices, we will fumble this in some type of way just as a collective.
But, when you talk about a ladder CR, people are struggling to define it. Would Biden even sign that? Would he sign a laddered continuing resolution?
I can't imagine, but that would also mean it passes the Senate. And Chuck Schumer has said that it's DOA there. You're going to see the Senate try to jam the House now, and I wonder if the upper chamber saves the day.
When you look at the hard right flank of this GOP, will they go for a clean CR? At one point, Johnson was talking about a clean CR in January or April. Will they give him that honeymoon?
I have no idea. I mean, does anybody really know what they're going to do?
He doesn't know.
Right, he doesn't even know. Hopefully they will. I mean, they saw the mess that they've created. When they voted Kevin out, when they joined with the Democrats to get rid of Speaker McCarthy, you saw the damage they did. Hopefully they would go along with a clean CR.
30 seconds. Think the Democrats are upset that they didn't give McCarthy some votes to have some normal order?
No, not at all. I think at this point, I think the writing was on the wall there, whether it be sooner or not. But at this point, I think we're maybe a little nervous.
All right. Our thanks to Alvin Jordan and Sarah Chamberlain. All these stories and more on the Washington Edition newsletter, on the terminal, and online.
Thanks for joining us. Some balance of power. We'll pick this up again tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.